So now to another interesting topic that I think we can jump into. And Philip, I'm going to throw that one at you and Debo. Semiconductor shortage. I know that that's a spicy one. Okay. Why? Why do we even have that? Why should we be discussing that at all? Why?
Okay. I think that's one of the most important things I think right now. But maybe a lot of people still don't understand why. But maybe semiconductors are also called chips, and they are used in the production of almost everything we use, from computers to cars to phones to games. So everything we use, anything electronic, most of them, there's a high tendency or high probability that they use the chip or the semiconductor. So of course, everybody is involved in this one way or the other. An experience I had recently was that a friend ordered a computer, which normally should be delivered within a week, but it took more than a month to get delivered. And the reason given was that there's a shortage of chip or shortage of the semiconductor. So what it means essentially was last year, during the pandemic, a lot of things changed, including, a lot of people were working from home. So the things they were asking for, the demand, shifted also. People were asking more for personal computers, for games, for, other electronic equipment, which led to a surge in the demand for semiconductors. And that's not the only thing. Also because the 5G technology, of course, a lot of us have heard of it. Some are still living in denial as to whether it is going to come into. But for the 5G technology, they use more of the semiconductors as it comes. So, of course, the demand, increased greatly last year. When you look at the figures, even for the personal computers, it surged far beyond the normal year-on-year increase. So, because of that, the demand was too much and they couldn't cope with those who produce it couldn't produce enough to meet up with the demand. Of course, when you know the way it is, it's just simple economics. When the demand is too high and supply cannot match up, there's something that would shift. One of it is that price has to move a little bit. Even if you don't have total control over, by the time somebody who needs it more than you do is ready to offer slightly more than you are able to, then, of course, everything changes. So, of course, those who produce, like Intel, like NVIDIA, like Qualcomm, some of, I think the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, they've not been able to meet up. I read, the interview, the TSM, that's the Taiwan Semiconductor president had, and he's saying that, it's not because demand is too high, but it's because they are still gauging what the supply is. But I've now read that they invested about $28 billion to increase capacity. So if there's enough supply and you have enough capacity, why would you have to invest $28 billion to improve your capacity to produce these chips? So, of course, there is a shortage, severe shortage. Many of the auto companies like Ford, like General Motors, they've had to, reduce their production this year. Some of the factories, in fact, had to be closed down because they didn't have enough semiconductors. And why the auto industry is suffering more is because last year they were expecting a reduced demand. So their expectation actually was that people were not going to, of course, people were not going anywhere. And they expected that the demand for cars was going to drop significantly. But it didn't happen as much as they expected. So now that they've seen that demand is still high and they're trying to, they're not able to get enough from those who produce. Because they also now have some new loyal customers, those who produce games and computers. And of course, you will have to stay with somebody who will stay with you during the period when everything is supposed to be tough. So those ones seem to have the upper hand now when it comes to the chips and the semiconductors. But of course, one thing that is important is that everybody is affected, whether you know it or not. If you have to ask, if you want to buy a new car or you have to buy a new computer, you will see what is really going on within that space because everyone is actually involved in this. But I think Debo might have more on this.
David, do you have a position on this? Now, I'm more curious about what the opportunities are. So yes, there's a problem. In the midst of this problem, is there some benefit? Something for an investment?
Okay. Certainly, there are opportunities, of course. When you look at the companies, if you look at the entire value chain, and you look at those who are involved in the production of semiconductors, it's clear that if you position properly, you might, in the stocks, by buying some of the stocks of some of these companies, it might be a good way to actually benefits from that industry. Because I read recently that NVIDIA, the stock price has been moving on at a very high level. And I think it's the same with some of these other semiconductors. Of course, you expect demand to be high. And if demand is going to be high, then it opens up opportunities even for those who invest in that industry. They can't meet up with demand right now, no matter what they say. I think what they are trying to do is to discourage new entrants from the industry. Of course, you want to be the only one so that you can make all the money. But of course, those are the things. So I think if you target some of the stocks, it might be a good thing to do right now.
Okay. So Devo, as an investor.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with Philip in that area. In fact, that was where I was going to come in terms of where we as individuals can benefit. Of course, I do not have the technology or the capital to set up a company to produce semiconductors, but we can invest in those companies given their current situation. As Philip mentioned, with the current situation, we're expecting prices to rise because, of course, demand is way higher than supply. And of course, also to add to why the auto industry seems to suffer more, as Philip has mentioned, the size of the entire auto industry only buys about $4 billion worth of semiconductors, whereas Apple alone, which is the largest consumer, buys $56 billion worth of semiconductors yearly. So the auto industry is a minor in this case. So they will not be the focus when the manufacturers are trying to ration who gets at any point in time. So we could expect that the auto industry will continue to suffer until the manufacturing is up to be able to meet the demand.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you, Michael. Michael also just dropped a comment about that. So thank you for sharing that with us, Michael. So because I'm very mindful of time today, okay, I'm literally looking at the clock. So when you guys are speaking, I'm like, okay, how do I get them to just direct this conversation faster? And for our participants joining, please feel free to drop any questions you might have in the comment section. We'll pick it up. So while we wrap up this semiconductor global shortage, which obviously has some impact on individuals, companies, wherever category we place it, there is an impact on us, the consumers. Now,